This week we started a review of the different 8 parts of speech that go with grammar to help you make sure that you remember them from last year, because it is a lot of information, and to make sure that whether you came from St. Mary's or another school or had Mrs. Rosengard or Mrs. Haberly, that we're all kind of on the same page as far as knowing the parts of speech. You should have learned those up through 7th grade, so this hopefully is going to just be a review lesson, just to get you familiar with some of the terminology that we're going to be using throughout the year. So we started with a discussion of what is grammar and why is it important. And we said that grammar is about using the 8 parts of speech correctly when speaking and writing. And we talked a little bit about why this is important. Is grammar or using incorrect grammar going to stop you from getting into college or stop you from getting a job? Probably not. But we decided that it just makes you look better educated, and maybe if it did come down between 2 people who were going for the same job and one had a lot of errors in spelling and grammar usage and the other didn't, that would probably make the other person look better. So we're going to do this first screencast is going to be on the first 4 parts of speech, and then I'll do another one on the other 4 parts of speech that we started today and we'll do tomorrow. So we're going to start with talking about what is a noun, and we're using a frame because it's giving us similar information about each of the parts of speech, and it allows us to organize this in a way to show the relationships between them. So by definition, a noun is a word that names a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. And so we talked about what are some examples. And so students in class gave these examples: boy, school, a boy is a person, school is a place, a table is a thing, and beauty is the idea of a noun. And when we talk about an idea noun, it's not a noun that everybody can agree on the same definition for, and you can't see it, but it's definitely a noun because it's a thing. It's an idea of something that could exist. We also added the word bill in there because it's a little bit different. It is a noun, but it's a noun that names a specific person or place. So in looking at some of the terms that we should know when we're talking about nouns, we started with common, and the 4 that are not capitalized are common nouns. They just name a regular noun. There could be a million of them around the world, nothing in particular. When we start getting more specific though, like bill, we're giving the specific name of a person, so it's a proper noun and it does need capitalized. We looked at the difference between singular and plural. Singular names one, boy, and plural names more than one, boys. We talked about a collective noun, and this is probably a new term this year, and we said a collective noun is any noun that when you name it in its singular form, like team, one team, automatically makes you think of more than one person involved in that team. And then we have concrete and abstract. And to know the difference between those, we talked about concrete, it's something that you can see, something that you can touch. And abstract, we compared that to abstract art. If you went to see a painting and it looked like a bunch of splatters on a page, and you saw the title and it said Man Walking in the Woods, and you just couldn't quite see it, it's a little abstract because the person who painted it could see it, but it's not something that you can see. So we said our abstract nouns are going to be these idea nouns, kind of like beauty or wisdom or intelligence. There's not one set definition for it. So we came up with a hint, something if we were looking at a sentence and we wanted to identify the nouns, a hint that we came up with is that you can put a, an, or the in front of most nouns. So we tried it out with the nouns that we have: a boy, a school, a table, the beauty. The beauty of the painting was not something that everyone could see. So it is a noun, and that did not work for proper nouns. Okay, and our second part of speech then is a verb. And we said every sentence has to have a verb. So for this one, we actually started thinking about what are some examples of verbs first. and we came up with run. And then we talked about there's different ways to say run. You can say run, he runs, I ran. We had some other verbs like am, is, are, was, were. And a third type of verb, has, have, had. And so we were able to classify or define a verb as a word that expresses an action or a state of being, meaning that it exists. I am, I exist. So we have a special set of verbs called the linking verbs. And so we got into our discussion of verbs by breaking them down into 3 different kinds. There are action verbs that show action. Linking verbs are verbs that show state of being. And then we have helping verbs. For some of our different tenses, we might have to put a verb in front of runs. I am running to the store. I was running during the track meet. So we've got this last set of verbs that are helping verbs. And we will learn and memorize those for this year because there is a limited amount, and once we memorize them, it makes them a lot easier to find in sentences. Another related term that we'll talk about a lot is tense, and we get into this when we're writing a lot because you have to pick a tense. If you're writing in present tense, that means that you're writing about right now, and all your verbs have to remain in that tense. Same with past and future. So in thinking about how can we recognize a verb in a sentence, we came up with, for these action verbs, ask yourself, is it something that can be done? Can you ski? Can you talk? Can you run? So those are actions. Those would be verbs. We also said that sometimes you can look to see if you can add ing to the verb. Running, walking, skiing, talking. Now unfortunately that rule is not going to help us when we're trying to recognize our linking verbs and our helping verbs, which is why we just have to memorize those. Our third part of speech is an adjective. And we started by naming some examples of adjectives because we know that adjectives are words that describe. So we said tired, excited, brave, exuberant would all be words to describe how somebody is feeling. So looking at what is an adjective, instead of the word describes, we're going to be using the word modifies a lot. It means the same thing, but we're trying to use a 7th grade term that is going to improve our vocabulary a bit. So a word that modifies a noun or a pronoun is an adjective. Some different terms that we'll talk about, article adjectives, a, an, and the. And we actually use those words over here when we were talking about nouns, which makes sense because we said adjectives are words that describe nouns, so we should be able to put them in front of nouns. And we can kind of use that in the reverse, and I don't actually have that here, but if you have an adjective and you want to see if it's an adjective, see if you can put it before a noun. A tired person, an excited boy, a brave man, an exuberant child. So any of these adjectives can be put directly before a noun to see if they kind of make sense. Another way to recognize adjectives is by answering questions. What kind of person? A tired person. Which one did you want? That one. How many different ways can you say said? 1,000. How much does that cost? $5. So we can use these questions to help us recognize adjectives within a sentence. And then our last part of speech that we're going to talk about right now is an adverb. An adverb and adjective sound kind of the same at the beginning, which is why we like to talk about them together. And they do have a similar job in that they both are modifiers. Adverbs are kind of nice though because the word that they modify is actually within the word adverb. An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So some examples that we had to come up with. We said excitedly, bravely, tells how you would do something. How did you run into the room? He ran excitedly. How did he fight? He fought bravely. When did he fight? Often. And so these were some of our adverbs that we came up with. And there were no related terms. We're not going to really get into adverbs too much, other than recognizing that many of them end in ly, not all, and that we also have some questions that can help us recognize our adverbs. How did he run quickly? When did he go to the store? Yesterday. Where are you going? There. And to what extent was he excited? Very excited. So excited. And then we also talked about these no, not, never words. These are negative words. A lot of times we'll talk about double negatives, but whenever we see these negative words, those are counted as adverbs as well. So, these are the first 4 parts of speech, and we said these are probably the 4 most common because you have to have a noun and a verb in a sentence. We said that doesn't make a very good sentence, but really a sentence only has to have 2 words in it, a subject and a verb. Mrs. Culleton ran. It's not a very exciting sentence, which is where we get into our adjectives, our adverbs, and our other parts of speech. But these are probably the most common. Okay, so this would be a good video for you to watch, hopefully, if you missed or were absent, or you want to study and make sure you understand them. So there will be another screencast that shows you the difference between the other 4 parts of speech.